add my welcome to you all, and thanks for responding in such large numbers. This is a very special occasion. I recognise Booktown and Peter, Mary and Jordan, who lead this outstanding organisation. And your presence here today really confirms the energy and supports the energy they've put in over the last year to put this together. Gilbert, a warm welcome to you.
Thank you, Bob.
I've had the pleasure of reading your book over the last couple of weeks. I think it's special, and I really encourage you all before you leave today to grab a copy from Anna, because it's an outstanding read and a very special chapter in the history of our national game. And I think that's what came through to me. Gilbert, I just want you to touch on initially the announcement just over 2 weeks ago that the All Blacks have got their secret ingredient back. And I thought that was a very good description of the reappointment of Gilbert to be part of the All Black team that's going to go to South Africa a bit later this year, and of course line up at the Rugby World Cup in Australia next year. So Gilbert, you've really taken on something here, and I'd just like you to comment now on the, you're back in the fold, and clearly there was obviously a fair bit of negotiations went on to achieve that, but congratulations, it's an outstanding achievement for you.
Thank you, Bob. Morena, everybody, and once again, thanks for the wonderful welcome. Last night was special. I felt a wonderful warmth in the room in rural New Zealand, and what's special about this area for me is one of your greats, and that's Sir Brian Lahore. So I have a fondness whenever I think of him, and I do think of him often, and it's good to come back and mix with his community whānau. Yeah, the interesting one, Bob, I never went looking for the role. When Dave Rennie called me and said they'd done a lot of feedback post last year with the players and management, and a lot of the feedback was there was a piece that they felt was missing, and that was the connection to the legacy and the meaning of those sort of things. So I never went looking for it, it came calling for me. The toughest conversation I had was with my wife and kids, really. I just wanted to make sure that they were supportive of it, because the way you do that job and do it well is you've got to get inside it and live it 24/7. You've got to breathe it, you've got to ingest it, you've got to let it penetrate every part of you, because that's the only way you influence things that are special, and you tap into things from the past that can nourish the present. And I got the wonderful welcome from them, or not the welcome, but the endorsement from them to say that that's okay. And you now got 2 Cook Islanders running our national game, so you're all in good hands.
Exactly, pretty special. Thanks, Gilbert. So just noting that Gilbert has over 40 years in major leadership roles, including 23 years working for the All Blacks. Isn't that outstanding? 23 years. And of course, has just signed up for another stint, as we've talked about. He was involved with 2 Rugby World Cup wins, and we'll talk a wee bit about that during the morning. 7 Tri-Nations, and 21 consecutive Bledisloe Cup wins. So that's really giving it to the Aussies, isn't it? So that's pretty special.
Yes.
Gilbert,
there's
looking
no
at
Aussies in here, is any Aussie? Oh, there's a couple of hands over there. We love you, really.
Gilbert, looking at your early life, and in a pretty difficult, living in a pretty difficult environment, but I mean, real credit to you what you achieved. But it looks to me as though, reading your book, that the move to Christchurch was a major step in your life, and of course you finished up being part of their special Canterbury dynasty, and really become involved with that. Just talk about that, some of that sort of...
Yeah, a lot of people sort of ask me a little bit about, why did you move to Christchurch, how did it come about? And it was really interesting, because it wasn't I didn't get counselled into moving, because my upbringing, obviously spending the 12 years in the orphanage, I was very much alone, so lots of things were going on inside my head, and that's where I thought that the only way I was going to get on with what I wanted to achieve was to do it myself. And so I wrestled with a lot of those sort of thoughts, and I can still remember hopping on the bus, travelling from Palmerston north to Wellington, very, very scared, uncertain, but knowing that it was a step in the right direction, so, and I can remember standing on the wharf at Littleton, and I said, geez, what have you done? 16, and I don't encourage anybody to let their children do what I did at 16, especially with all the drugs and everything else that's available, which we didn't really have in those days. It was just more, it was the insecurity. But I mean, so people say, what made the difference? I think luck.
Right.
I think luck was big of it, and I encourage people, like the book has a lot of stories from the wide-ranging experiences across a whole range of sports, but the thing I love, what I try to do in it was actually to move beyond that and extract lessons from it. And one of the things I love, a lot of comments, and especially from a lot of women say to me, Gilbert, I don't like sport and I hate rugby, but I love your book.
Right.
And that was really good. And so let's look at the luck, and say, luck, well, I met Wayne Smith. He walked through the door at Hill Morton High School, and who would have known that he was a trailblazer and understood the role of psychology. And then I met Lee Gibbs, and the netball coach, and she was on the staff at Hill Morton, and then she employed me as assistant coach for the Canterbury netball team when way before anyone else was even into it, and she had to take on all the hierarchies, attitudes and opinions about employing a male inside a female domain, which is normally the opposite. And so in the end, I've learnt the lesson from those sort of things is it's not luck, it's the return on luck you get. And, a lot of people get a good return on good luck, but I think you can get as equal amount of return on bad luck. And so the key thing is, what if you get to a bad situation, how can I maximise the return that I can get on it, both personally and professionally? So I was, in Christchurch at 16, flatting. It was a very precarious time in my life. I didn't even know myself. It took me a long time to grow into myself. You'll hear in the book I talk a lot about my mother-in-law, and as I said last night, there's not many books where you talk about arguably the greatest of all time, Richie McCaw, and then the very next two sentences I talk about my mother-in-law being the equivalent of that stature, because she was patient, she didn't push me, she just took her time and in a wise way helped me grow into myself, and I get emotional when I think about it, but that was how
Pete, did you have a question?
Yes, I actually forgot to say at the beginning, because this is the first time we've ever done this. Gilbert has said he's willing to take questions right through the session, rather than questions at the end. So
Sorry, Pete. Yeah.
no, I should. My mistake.
No, that's
So,
good.
If you want to ask a question as we go through this morning's,
You're beautiful, Bigsy. You're a beautiful man.
we'll give it a go, eh, Bob?
Yeah, totally.
You're going for mayor here, mate. I reckon you do a good job.
So Gilbert, one of the real features of the in the book is the issue of sports psychology and the acceptance of sports psychology as a legitimate part of a coaching environment and the part you played. And I think touch on some of those challenges when you started, where you had to become a de facto masseur to sort of get the position. But I found some of that really interesting. The other thing that really surprised me, that Chris Wiley eventually agreed that sports psychology had a place. But anyway, touch on some of that.
He was an early adopter too. Like the earliest adopters, and look, I'd never have got any opportunities without a Wayne Smith and a Lee Gibbs, and even Keith Mayer, the basketball coach. He was similar.
I think we should come back to Wayne Smith because he's been such a close colleague. Yeah.
But I mean, like academia has they get on a high horse a little bit and they think that they are the adjudicators of all knowledge, and so here all I did was I was playing, I wanted to get better, and I was asking questions, what's getting in the way? And everything that was really getting in the way was between people's ears. Self-confidence, self-doubt, dealing with fears, getting on with people. How do I remain committed when I don't really want to do it? And so no one was really looking at it. So
No.
I said, I'm not going to put all this time into my performance and come up short. So that's why I started studying it. Then I went in with Wayne, and then people started questioning what I was doing because I didn't have a PhD or any of those qualifications. So you can imagine me coming through my background as a young kid in the orphanage, then coming into a sport that I loved and getting better at it and getting opportunities. Then you have the academic fraternity sort of pushing you down, and so everything seemed, I just thought that was my lot, everything's going to be an obstacle to do that. But and the masseuse, Wayne, the people from the board said, no, if you need a sports psychologist or somebody in mental performance area, you're weak as a coach and the players shouldn't be selected.
Yep.
And that's why I love this phrase, sometimes your impatience to win is the reason you lose. Because, something like, if Wayne had been impatient and said, no, I want him, and he only comes in as a mental performance coach, then I'd never have got the opportunity and I wouldn't been able to influence. So he said, well, let's just put you in this over here. So I was a masseuse, and we would sit there, and someone would say, one of the board members are coming up, and Smithy would go, come here, you need to go and get some oil. So I'd go down. I'd go down to the local shop down there, and I bought some oil, but I got peanut oil instead of and the board member came in, they came through the door, and I looked over and I was rubbing someone's shoulder. But afterwards, Smithy said to me, gosh, we wanted you to rub him, not fry him. But I mean, that is, how quite often you get something really clear in your head and you're talking to someone that's not in the same reality as you. And if you get really impatient, you do it with our kids and other people we care about, and you do it too fast and quickly, you lose, and then they just shut the door, shut the gate, and they're gone. So, that whole notion of sometimes your impatience to win is the reason you lose. I think of that often.
Yeah. So Gilbert, it's worth noting that you had 300 outings as a mental performance and leadership coach with the All Blacks. I mean, that's absolutely outstanding, and comes through strongly in the book that sustaining that involvement and performance and dealing with changing All Blacks too. That obviously had to be coached into the thinking and that. Just touch a wee bit on that.
Yeah, look, it's well, I'm going back in for another tour of duty, but even in 2023, the last 3 or 4 years, there were people in the team hadn't even been born when I started. And that sort of, you're sitting there, and in comes a young Rico Ioane and and all the new age, beautiful men, by the way. That you just, I've always felt, that no matter who you're with and who you're working with, difference is never an issue. So, I grew myself through my connection with them, and I got more rounded through my involvement with them. And you hear a lot of teams and a lot of groups talking about being very diverse and having diversity. And I did it when I went to Chelsea. I had 13 months with Chelsea football, and they had so many different people in there, but that wasn't the issue. The issue was lack of connection.
Right.
And so when you don't have connection that's strong enough to hold tension, then teams don't function well. So all I do when a young one comes in, and I'll do it again, they said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to open those, and I'm going to keep those open. And I need to look and feel and see what's in front of me, and then I'll be just working really strongly and hard on the connection. How am I going to connect with these men and women on management, and then if you get that right and you get that strong, it's a really positive thing. And so, like, if you can give me the liberty to explain.
Yeah, totally.
And so, kind of like. And I talked about it last night. You look at the cover of that book and you think, wow, this is just all about success. Well, I tell you, it isn't. It's about the struggles, and it's about the times teams I had were hurting, and my own life was hurting. And so what I do with people is this is a really core understanding. If you drew a triangle like that, I call it the performance triangle. The top you put mindset, the bottom you put skill set, and on the right you put structure. Mindset, skill set, structure. And I think if you get all those three things aligned in any endeavour, in the home, in a sports team, in a business, wow, she can take off. Okay, and so when somebody comes through the door, I quite often say, is it a mindset issue, a skill set issue, or a structure issue? Helps me help them. Now, as I've gone through the 23 years, Bob, I've found one of them to be a superpower. And if you really understand it, it's powerful beyond measure. Now, put your hand up if you think skill set is that superpower. Interesting. Spend a lot of time, don't we, on skills. Raise your hand if you think mindset is that superpower. Look around your room.
Yeah.
Okay? Now raise your hand if you think structure is that superpower. Beautiful. You've got 2 or 3, 4 or 5 hands up there. It's a strong. Why do you say it's a superpower? None of it comes into play unless you have the right structure. You're right. I've found structure to be the superpower. Now let me explain. So everyone comes into the All Blacks, everyone comes into the Black Ferns or Silver Ferns. When they come into that environment, there's nothing wrong with their mindset. They want to be there 10 years, want to play 100 tests, want players of the day. I want to set up things for my family. I want to create opportunities for my own branding. Nothing wrong with their mindset. Even before they start a game, they want to go out there and perform really, really well. The mindset's really, really strong. And skills, they blow you away with some of the things that they're able to do. The skill set's just incredible. When performance breaks down, it's normally because the structures they have in place to manage the competing demands break down. So I've got to do my prehab, my rehab, my line-out meeting, my unit meeting, my team meetings. I've got to do recovery after the game. I've got to do media. I've got to work at home and do all these things. And we've got this whole plethora of things that I have to manage and put together. Mothers do it better than anyone, by the way, running the households. It's like that game of Jenga, you know, where you actually put all those blocks in, and if you pull one out, the structure wobbles a little bit, and if you pull 2 or 3 out, the whole thing can fall over. Now, I was talking to a young halfback from down south. I won't say his name, but you'll work out who he is. And I was trying to explain to him that the issues he was having on the field had more to do with structure than mindset. You know, I said I wanted him to look through that lens. And I explained that to him, and he said to me, Bert, he says, that's bullshit. He says, I'm on the field, the referee makes a decision that I don't agree with, and I want to punch him in the head. And so unless I shift my mindset, I go nowhere. And I said, how's that going for you, mate? And he says, not very good. And I said, on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is I'm clear, I'm on task, I'm focused, and I'm really in control of things, I'm ready to nail anything. And 10 is I'm annoyed, I'm frustrated, I'm on the verge of doing something silly and putting myself and the team at risk. Where are you? He said, 11 out of 10. And so I said, okay, on Saturday when you're out there, when the referee makes a decision that you don't agree with, which happens most days, correct, in all sports, I want you to try this. Take 3 paces away from where you are. 1, 2, 3. And ask 3 people, what are you seeing? What are you seeing? What are you seeing? Repeat one of them back to the person, take a breath, come back and connect with your next situation. So he said he'd try it. And I looked at him and he was trying it. And I said to him afterwards, how'd that go, Nuggie? And he says, pretty good. He said, I went from an 11 out of 10 to a 6 or 7 out of 10. What had we given him? Structure. We'd given him a structure to shift his mindset. And so you have macro structures, these big things like today you're going to do this, 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 this. But what I talk about in the book is the power of the micro structures. You know, those structures you put in place for those dangerous moments when your emotion spikes. You need a mental scaffold to enable yourself to do things. And I tell people to do 3 things. 1, first thing you've got to do is steady the mind. People just say, just go and do the task, just go and do the task. But if you do that without steadying the mind, then you can be all over the place. Second thing you do is shrink the moment. Shrink the moment is bring your time horizon forward. Right, you know, Dan Carter used to do this, and I think we talk about that in the book, Bob, you know.
Yes.
For the next 2 minutes, when things have been going difficult for him, rather than thinking about the outcome, he says, all I'm going to concentrate is getting up off the ground and getting into position faster than my opposition. And he does it for 2 minutes, And after that 2 minutes, it goes from 11 down to a 6 or 7. Doesn't remove it. We can manage things at 6 or 7 in terms of doing that. And then the third thing is just concentrate on a small action inside that shrunken moment. Steady the mind, shrink the moment, and a small action. And once you understand that in high performance structure's king, you'll get through anything in life, I think, and all the tough things I've been through in life, I've managed them because the structure and discipline become two components that really, really help. You know, I always, you know, that discipline's a really interesting one. I always say in the All Blacks there's two ways of doing things. One, the right way. Two, again. And then once you get that up there, so when you're dealing with people and you see their emotions spike, help them to create a structure that can basically help them manage the mindset. Because our emotions spike all through the day based on people we see, things we encounter, but we've never been taught that basic way of actually dealing with it. And that's really, you know, what I tend to do a lot, Bob, with them is to really work on that aspect. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
If you take one thing away about for yourself and those, take that. In the land of high performance, structure is king and discipline's its queen. And between those two things, you'll get through anything in life. It won't be a 0, but it'll be 6 or 7. You can manage that.
So, Gilbert, you touched on Dan Carter, but in the book, you talk often about a very special group of All Blacks. Richie McCaw, Dan Carter, and one or two others. Just talk a wee bit about what makes them special and the relationship you built with them, which was obviously very special too.
Yeah, well, you know, they're all built. They're blessed with some God-given talents, but not one of them went through periods where they didn't have self-doubt, where they didn't have adversity. You know, it's a guarantee everyone's gonna have adversity, and as they got to know themselves, we built lots of little mini structures to help them manage those periods. And boy, if we could do that with the talent they had, they could then, you know, really go crazy. Like, people often ask me, you know, who the top athletes that you work with, and those two are right up. Dan Carter's probably the most gifted athlete, I think. You know, no one told him in those World Cups to take those drop kicks at goal. It wasn't like coaches sitting down when you get here. He'd done that 1,000 times in the backyard in Southbridge when he was growing up. You know, I'm on the world stage and it's a big moment. Everything comes down. Here I go, whooshka. And you're sitting there and go, thank God for that, Dad.
Many of us here would have had fond memories of his performance against the Lions in Wellington that day. And many of us would have been there. We were at the game. That was unbelievable. It's
very, very special. And, you know, Richie would never be the captain he was if he hadn't been through what happened in 2007, where, you know, we had such, you know, the pain of that loss, the worst in history. But ordinary men with extraordinary talent, that they built structures and had discipline to enable them to be executed consistently. And I think that was the power of...
Stay with 2007, because that was a horrendous tournament for the All Blacks and for New Zealand rugby. And I've got to share with you just briefly, Gilbert, that I had a little role in that, and that I was a member of the IRB selection panel for referees around the world at that time. And
you select Barnsley.
So we, so just to complete the story,
out of here.
So there was 4 of us. I did, as I said, did a 6-year stint, travelled the world, and appointed referees to internationals, including World Cups. So we're based in Paris for the 2007 Rugby World Cup, and the 4 of us go and watch all the 4 games separately, and come back. Our task then is to determine who's going to referee the quarterfinal, semis, and final. And so we selected Wayne Barnes to do that game, and Carla.
Worst decision you've ever done in your life.
Yeah, well, I admit it. Gilbert has lived with me a fair bit, but you do refer in the book to that as being a really strong point of reflection and relook, and so just touch on what happened post that horrendous sort of loss.
Well, you know, it's really interesting because a question I ask myself, and I'm asking it at the moment now actually, as I enter back into the All Black arena, is what needs evolution and what needs revolution? You know, and so as you go through and you look into the future and you look at where you're at and what's happening, some things will benefit by you evolving them, and other things you've got to have a revolution, you've got to totally change the picture. I said today, you know, I said, you know, the model we've got for leadership in the All Blacks is what we introduced back in 2005. Right. Where we went from a hierarchical top-down model to a shared leadership model. And we did it, the rest of the world had they were doing the old model. Now everyone in the world, across all sports, have leadership groups. And I said, you know, the All Blacks are always at their best when we're ahead of the pack. Yeah. We're doing things that no one else is doing. So I've been working with him since March, and we're looking at just sort of trying to take this piece into a different direction, right, and just to see what is right. And back in 2007, I shudder when I think about this, and I say, what a dork I was. We were trying to avoid pressure. You know, we thought that to win at international level, you needed to rise above pressure so that you don't experience it. You've got to go around it and you push it to the side. And so we had to totally change our relationship with pressure. Right. And so we were treating it as an unwelcome visitor. And a lot of people in their lives treat pressure as an unwelcome visitor. But once you understand that pressure isn't your enemy, it's your arena. You know, you're all living in the world and you all have your fair share, we all do. But once you understand that you're not trying to rise above it, you're not trying to go around it, you just get inside it. And you get inside this little bubble, and all of a sudden, yep, this is pressure. I'm bringing up, you know, teenagers. I'm coaching and working in sport, and there's a lot of discomfort and uncomfortableness. What do I use to manage the discomfort? What do we use? Structures. We just build structures. Sometimes we don't know, so we get help, and it helps us navigate all the way through it. So we changed our relationship with pressure, Bob. Yes. And I needed assistance because I thought I was part of the problem, because that was my domain and I hadn't been able to give people access to the skills they needed. So I spent a lot of time upskilling myself, talking to neuroscientists and forensic psychiatrists, and the effort to try and get it really simple, yeah, into there. And then from that day on, when we just sort of said, right, pressure's something that we want to lean into, pressure's something that we really, really want to occur, because if you're playing sport and you're in a pressure situation, you're normally in a good space, because you're on the brink of achieving something great. Right. And so that was the catalyst for 11, that was the catalyst for 15, coinciding with some terrific players, generationally talented players. But if I put it down to one thing, that was what, and you hear all the players talk that language too. Yeah. So, yes. Look at that. We'll just grab the mic.
Kia ora, hi.
Kia ora.
Talking about this structure, I'm really interested to know and the difference between working with men or women. Obviously, women have other structures that are already working against us. The microaggressions we face all the time, you know, less pay, the mental load. So when you're working with men or women, have you found that you've had to work differently in terms of the structure that you set up or support women with?
Great question, and the short answer to that is yes. The macro theory that goes around it is, I used to think one size fits all, and we're all taught that. But what I've learned in my work is one size fits one. And once you understand that every single person that's in front of you is a unique individual, and you've got to adapt the structure to that individual. And the first and most important thing I think that we need to be able to do is to meet the person where they're at. If the most important thing in leadership is, someone said, what do you think the most important thing? That's it. Meet the person where they're at. And if you do that, and too many of us try to rush in and solve, try to rush in and fix. But if you step back a bit and just take your time to get that understanding. Now, I've been doing, when I was in Chelsea I did a lot of work with Emma Hayes. I don't know whether any football people here. She was the coach of Chelsea, and she now coaches the USA women's team. She's doing brilliant work, and she's challenging the paradigm that a lot of trainers are training women like they should be training men, like they're training men, and they said the physiology is different, the biology is different. We've got to change the whole paradigm. Let's not compare women to men. Why should we compare to what the men are doing in sport, like the tennis players talking about what the men are doing and the women? Just treat them as their own separate entity, work with them as individuals and what they're doing and help them grow. So I think the pendulum's swinging, but personally I always go one size fits one. I want to meet you where you're at, and then I want to be able to look at what things are, what your attention's doing in those moments that are causing you challenges, and then help you steady the mind, give your attention to something, shrink it in a way that you can go so you can navigate and manage your way through it. Does that make sense? Is it helpful? Good.
You mentioned referees, which I think is interesting because being a referee requires a lot of mental fortitude as well. I'm a part-time basketball referee. I started a few years ago. It's quite nerve-wracking, you know, and I'm wondering if you've ever worked with referees to help them rise to the occasion as well.
Yeah, well, they're high-performing athletes too, the men and women that have the whistle. I take my hat off to them. The game can't achieve what it achieves without them growing as well. And yes, I have. I've even back in the day, I was just talking to Bob, you know, when I first was cutting my teeth in this area, and he was strutting his stuff, and he was a bigwig, a much respected and terrific leader of that particular group of people. I treat them as no different. I've done some work with Ben,
O'Keefe.
Ben O'Keefe.
Yep.
He came and we just talked, and he is absolutely no different to the player. Looking at the structures and preparation for a game and trying to manage the emotional spikes, those dangerous moments that occur. And professional athlete, basketball referee, same, and deserve the same treatment and held on the same pedestal, because the rising tide lifts all the boats, so we've got to keep lifting all of them together.
I think one of the key issues still is that the referees know what their role in the game is, and so keeping that right perspective is critical. I think we've seen a wonderful move in the last 12, 18 months with Holly Davidson emerging as a woman referee that's good enough to referee internationals. I see that as a wonderful innovation and change, and so Gilbert, there's some great opportunities emerging for women to move into that area, which I think is superb.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think there's a question over here.
Hello. This is a supplementary question. You talked about one size fits one, meeting them where they're at. How do you practically do that when you're doing it with 15 plus players, a squad, everyone that's involved, and how do you do it with non-extraordinary people?
Okay, good. Geez, you're a bright bunch here.
Well, because I think that will be applicable to more people.
There's no wonder old BJ was such a great man, being nourished by the wisdoms of...
Yeah.
So let me answer that in two parts. Okay, so first part is when I want to get really good at something and explore great, I try and find out who in the world's doing it well, and I go over and I want to learn. I have a thirst for learning. So I took a group over to the States to the hotel chain Ritz-Carlton. And Ritz-Carlton are well known for their customer experience when you go into a hotel. The way they treat you from the moment, even before you go through the door, is extraordinary. And it's so good that people want to keep coming back. And so they did a study on team engagement. And at the end of it, they said, no matter whether it's a sports team, an education institution, an organisation, a Booktown festival committee, no matter what happens, all these teams have three distinct groups of people, types of people. Now, 32% of these people are what they call superstars and stars, and they just blow your mind in terms of what they can do. 51% of these people are what they call neutrals. They come in, they turn up, they do what's required, and they go. You know, they don't cause any problems, but they don't give you more than they need to. 17% are what they call cave employees, C-A-V-E, constantly against virtually everything.
Oh, what a classic.
And it's not whether or not you have them, every team has them. The All Blacks have them. Because when Dave names his team, the squad for the First Nations, you'll get, most of them are in that superstars and maybe a couple of neutrals, because, what does this mean for me? On Saturday, when he names the starting 15, which group are they in? Superstars. Fantastic. I've got the jersey. Those on the bench, you'll get a couple in the superstars because they're glad because they're actually stripping, and then you'll get quite a few in the neutrals. I've got to train and go through the motions, and then those people, the 13 that don't strip, where do they normally go? Into the cave, and that sort of thing there. So it's a natural thing. Now, come back to your question. So in the All Blacks, there's one person who, before every meeting, and before going on the bus to games or training, this person was in the room before anyone else came in. Who do you think that person was? Me. Why was I there?
Because you wanted to cite them each as individuals coming into that bus or meeting.
And so what did I want to know? Which group are you in today? Are you in the superstar, the neutral, or you're a cave? And that's exactly right. And so I sit there and they'd walk on the bus and they'd, geez, Bert, you're early. And I say, yeah, I like being here early, you know. And I just sit there and then I'll look. And when you've been through my sort of background, you become super sensitive to being able to read. And to read people and situations. And I'd just get up, go to the back of the bus. I'd go to Sam Whitelock, one of them, and say, Bob's a bit off today. You need to just check in. So when he's putting his boots on, going to training, one of the leaders sidle up beside them. And so that's where you meet them where they're at. I might go to the coaches. You know, I've had such and such. So, you know, this lack of connection is the key. And so all of a sudden we're saying you can't stop superstars, neutrals and caves. And we want to meet people where they're at. So you put in structures that enable you to do that accurately. I did it as a teacher at Hill Morton High School, actually. I taught at Hill Morton in Christchurch. It was a lower decile school. You had the tough kids that lived out at Rowley, and then you had the middle class people at Hawesville, so they came together. Lots of fights in the playgrounds and all that sort of stuff, because a lot of the kids were just dealing with their own issues. I always used to say, if a kid survived Hill Morton, they'd survive life. In terms, it's a bit risky, you know, for your children going through that, but it's difficult. But I mean, I used to try and get to class early so that when they came through the door, that's all I did. And sometimes I was a phys ed teacher, but I always took one class of science, you know, because we just wanted to keep in there. Sometimes I just wouldn't even teach the curriculum. I'd just teach the student. Because there's things going on with where they're at. The last thing they wanted to know was the periodic table and how to turn a Bunsen burner on. You know, they needed to know. So does that, yeah, so build, you know, keep coming back to this lack of connection, and you've got to build it strong enough to hold tension so that I can go to you and say, you know, what you're doing is not right, and then you move people.
You ever find that there were people that actually got on the bus before you, that actually worked out the system, and so therefore...
I bet you'd be one of those. No, but there were people inside their own structures that came on early. One of the earliest was always offered to Angawhasi. Oh. And he would always come, he'd be the next person. And Kevin Mialamu in his day was like that, and they'd have their own little wee rituals, old little routines, and you know, the All Black bus it's a quiet machine when you go into a game, and it's what Wayne always talked about with the Black Ferns. And you get on a bus going to the game, and you know, he said he didn't know whether they're going to a party or going to a war. But that was a beautiful example of the uniqueness of women, you know. And you know, and Ted in the end, he was selected. He couldn't go on the bus, because it was too much for him to have all this noise. He had to drive his own car to the
Yeah, beautiful.
just because it was such against his own structure. So if someone ever did that, I'd go earlier, but no one did. Yeah.
David?
Just a comment about thanks, Peter. Reading players as they go on the bus. But these days, when you see a lot of sporting teams, they've all got their headphones on, they've got sunnies on, they're sort of head down and walking sort of in a trance. It would be rather difficult to read some of those players, wouldn't it?
Well, if they did that, what you're looking for is patterns. And if someone did that and that was normal and regular, you'd learn that. And all of a sudden, if they're fronting up to a game and they don't have their headphones on, and they're not looking to stuff, and the body language is different, then it's a warning sign, you know. I always say, if you can meet an unexpressed need in an individual, it's a game changer. And so I'm sitting here looking at people and I'm just trying to say, well, what's going on? I was always involved with the Families and Partners program because that was important, because you wanted to keep that sort of, that connection and that support structures right, and that's so important to give them that there. But so one is I'm just looking for what's changing and what's normal for you, not judging. And I think that's important. And the other thing I'm always trying to say to people is there something you need that you're not sharing? Like I always tell people, you can't improve what you won't talk about. And particularly men. Women are far better at it because they share and they're more open with it. Men actually go inward. And so what do we have to do? Set up structures where we create opportunities for people to talk about how they're feeling. And that's where we've sort of really pushed the whole notion that vulnerable is the new strong. You know, it's actually strength to be vulnerable and to talk about your fears and your uncertainties, and you're not defined by them. You know, we want to be refined by those and the processes that we actually do. And I found that the more we created opportunities for people to express how they're feeling, and you know, Ted and them and Steve Hansen and even Foz would come into my room and say, where are you going with this? And I'd say, I don't know, but I know I'm heading in the right direction. And I felt confident in terms of doing that.
So Gilbert, that being open to that approach took some skill and trust and all that. So touch a wee bit about that, because that's a pretty critical part of your job.
The vulnerability type thing.
Yeah,
Paul.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit like, I think, for me, leadership is personal before it's positional.
Right.
You know, so you lead from who you are rather than where you sit. And in the old days, you had people in a hierarchy that sat up the top and they just barked out orders. But nowadays, authenticity is more important than status. You know, if you Google leadership, you'll get something like 3.4 billion hits, let alone what AI could do with the definition in and around that. But for me, it just comes down to two simple rules. And I always tell people I'm working with, if you understand these two simple rules and you put them into practice, then you'll lead your people well. First one is it's not about you, which is interesting.
Yep.
And then the second one is it's only about you, which is a beautiful contradiction. Why is it not about you? Is because you may be in a role where you're leading people, but whether they follow you or not is a choice. Not your choice, their choice. So people make a choice. You know, we've all been with leaders and we go, far out, you know, and they're plonkers, and in terms of what you want to ask now, or you.
Yeah, now's good. Thank you, Gilbert. You've partly answered a question about gender, which I was going to ask, so I'm going to change it slightly. I coach a ladies' football team. We play a team this afternoon at 1 o'clock. I wasn't going to ask if you were available, but we play a team with a greater skill set. What can I do or say that will make a difference?
You know, it's kind of interesting, isn't it? What I've done, and I do it in the book a little bit, I challenge the paradigm. I think the world has relied on what I call stoppable methods. They're methods that have power in the moment and feel good in the moment, but then they dissipate very quickly. Like I tell people, don't chase motivation. Just build strong systems. So you can get in there and you can give your girls the biggest pep talk this side of the black stump. They'll feel very, very good for 30 seconds, for a minute, and then by the time they're running out on the pitch, they'll just go straight back to where they are. And so what I'd be wanting to see is I'd wanting to steady their mind, and I'd want to say, where are they at? They're not over anxious, they're in a good space. What do you think the next thing I'd do? What's the second part of the structure? Shrink the moment. For the first 2 minutes, girls, I want you to think of this and put their focus on effort and things that they can control. Get to position first, connect with your teammates more, just get your conversations going backwards and forwards with the different team, and give them a task to focus on to get them started. And then as the game goes through and you get opportunities, just look for little wee windows that you can shrink, give them a specific small action inside that, and then get them going like hell and going through. So if I come back to those, so don't chase motivation, build strong systems. Everyone sort of talks about willpower. Willpower is temporary, and you do need it. You can rely on it at times, you can rely on motivation, but not for the long term. I'd rather you have discipline. It repeats again and again and again. And people talk about positive thinking, got to be positive. Positive thinking doesn't work. Doesn't work under pressure because it masks reality. I get people, they're in a game, the opposition score, they get in a huddle and they're going around here and they go, we can do this. Yep, we're brothers from another mother. Yeah. You got your back. Yeah. We're going sweet. You feel good. And they all feel good, but they're playing like a blimmin', a train wreck. We want them to say, right, the ball's going to kick off. We're going to kick a 4. You're going to contest it. When you get it, we want the ball back to here, and then we're going to move it here. Clear thinking is king. And so all of a sudden we're starting to challenge, don't chase motivation, just build strong systems. We want discipline, and it trumps willpower. We want clear thinking, not positive thinking. Don't just tell them to try harder because that strangles execution. We want composure. So there's an unstoppable toolkit, if you want, that we actually need to teach our individuals as they journey through life and into sport. Now, give me the 2 things you heard that you felt would make a difference with the girls this afternoon from what I just said. I'm meeting you where you're at.
Kia ora, Gilbert. Kia ora.
Where are you?
Kia ora here.
Oh, yeah.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
You're obviously a taonga, and thank you for everything that you've been able to achieve with the All Blacks. Do you have are you a mentor of others to be able to share what you know and the knowledge that you have, so that we can actually have people like you on sports fields at the ground roots? Yeah,
well, that's a great question, Wayne Smith wrote the foreword in my book, and he made a comment in it which was really good, and he says, sit back, buckle up, and work on getting better at getting better. And I really like that. Helping others to get better, and hey, I want to do that. I want to help people, and I talk to people that enable them to try things to get better. I don't have a set way. Why have I ended up here? I go to places that pull me into them. Different people. I was in Auckland yesterday speaking at a law conference, and a woman came up to me afterwards and she said, I just want to tell you that you saved my 14-year-old son. I said, what? She said, my 14-year-old son doesn't read, but he got your book and read my book. And then so all of a sudden he came to the dinner table and started talking. Something in there unlocked him. It was a bit like the woman I was talking to last night, to do that, you're helping another human being is one of the greatest endeavours anyone can do. And if you've got talent and experience that assist you to do that, then you want to be able to do that. So I'm pretty open in doing that. My my own mentor and the person that, you know, directs me very and keeps me level is my wife. And, you know, I talked about the book as constructed, Te Puna o Te Ki, which has these well springs of wisdom that are not only read, but they're felt. And you'll notice in the last chapter, I actually call it a golden wellspring. And so the golden wellspring is when in there is, you know, what's life all about? You know, and I talk about the fact that you can achieve things, you can be successful on your own, but you won't achieve all you're capable of on your own. And so you need other people in and around you. So that's what I attempt to do. And as you know, when I was that 16-year-old, Bob, and you talked to me and I was on the wharf at Littleton, I went and studied physical education, and the only way I could do that is the government paid me a studentship, paid me the equivalent of the dole. Yep. Imagine how many how many of our children are missing out on my background coming in and influencing that generation.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a big one that if we could do that, I often think about that, and I think we're a poorer society for not having those kids interacting and.
So we've got time for 2 more questions. We've got one here.
Gilbert, that's a
Oh, sorry.
that's a wonderful segue to this question, which is a public policy one, because your story is inspiring. I spent the first half of my career working with as a child psychologist with young disadvantaged people mainly, so your story is very familiar to me. And I've spent the last 20 years working with senior leaders in business, like very senior CEOs, top teams. And my experience would be is that unfortunately, our jails are full of the people that have your background, and the senior executive suites running our country I've maybe met a couple of people with as difficult a background as you've had, and that loss of potential to this country is crushing. And my question, the answer is, in my personal view, not boot camps, but what could our public policy leaders learn from your experience and knowledge about how to achieve more potential of people that have had your background?
First of all, congratulations on what you're doing, because that's a hell of an endeavour, and we need people doing that, and I could feel the warmth and genuineness in the way you asked the question. You know, one size fits one. Getting strong people like this in policy that feel it and believe it and lead your way through it, I think that becomes hugely powerful in terms of enabling those things to occur. You know, I'm not sure about that. You know, I think, but I know what you're saying, and you know, I was probably a lucky one. I always say, like, you don't go through a childhood like mine, and you'll know better than most, without having trauma that's triggered. And for me, it actually quite often daily, and it just comes out of nowhere. That's why life is a constant duel between your emotions and your mind. And that's really where I came into the power of structure. And, you know, so what I've been able to do, or attempt to do, as I journey through life, is to, as soon as I get that trigger, I catch it when it's a spark before it becomes a flame. And I've got better at doing that. Maybe getting more people like me into the education system so that we fund, you know, teachers. I had 13 years. You know, I had, you know, one of my guys, and I don't think he'll mind me saying it, was David Kidwell, the rugby league boy, you know. So I coached volleyball, and I took all these kids off the street. We ended up winning national titles, you know. And I had this one rule, is that you had to attend school to be in my volleyball team, you know. I used to sit there like the really good players. I went and picked them up every day and took them home. I did, because that's what I had to do. And then I get emails and say, well, you know, 50% of my son's friends are all in jail, exactly as you said, and said you saved my son going down that track, you know, and you know. But I think it's people and having role models that you know, you look up to them so much because they're their example of what you want to do, and I think that's where we miss it. And I would be looking at policy that funds people from experiences that we want to have interacting with our mokopunu, our tamariki, as they journey through their life.
Thanks, Gil. We got a question here and then one more over there, and that's it. Yes.
So my question is around how do you coach yourself, just in terms of, I know you've got to look after these teams, and I'm going back into a role, sort of, I'm not going to say similar, but, you know, get back into helping like sport and the arts, and going through life and having hits and hits and hits, and yet having a very strong professional career. How do you lift yourself in order to consistently fulfill that role?
Yeah, I think the question's a good one, because if you don't look after yourself, you can't do your job well. I'm not sure whether I talked about it last night, but I have a holy hour, which I've developed over time. And the holy hour for me is every day I think about three things that are important to keep me whole. First thing is related to my character. So I'm sitting there today, and I told the group last night, I want you to spend more time on your to-be list than I do your to-do list. You know, don't be so consumed with a to-do list. That'll take care of itself if you know who you need to be to deliver what you've got to do. So I'm sitting there today, I'm in the shower, and the door's fogged up, and I just wrote a little wee phrase, who I wanted to be when I was up here talking to you. Authentic, real, things that'll be of value to people so they don't see a fraud. Second thing is, I always look in my day and say, what are some potential situations, only one or two, where my emotion might spike and have a dangerous moment where it might win the duel. I might say, geez, I'm meeting Big Z and he's been a bit of a dickhead last night. So, what am I going to do when he comes in? So I just give some thought to what I'm going to do when I see him, what am I going to say, and then what am I going to do? And it's just a little wee mini structure that helps take it from a 9 or 10 down to a 6 or 7. And then the third area I look at is, what am I doing for my body? You know, so there are three things I do. One is I exercise. I gym gently these days, so I don't go hard. I get a massage every week because it stills my mind, and my mind is very busy. And the third thing is I do Bikram yoga. You know, the 26 postures in a hot room. I love it. And then when I'm on tour and things are really, really tough, at the end of the day I meet up, not all the time, but most nights, with our muscle therapist, George Duncan, and we open a bottle of red wine, and we sit there and we vent. We vent about everyone and everything.
What a classic.
And if you were in our team, we'd be venting about every single and the door's shut, no one can hear it, but then by the time we've had 2 or 3 glasses of red and toddle off, we feel so much better.
Yeah.
In terms of what we do.
Brilliant stuff, Gilbert.
Well, one more thing just to finish, sorry Bob, with that is necessity creates the opportunity for development for me, because when you're operating at the cutting edge, I always say you've got to have a next level, so there's got to be a gap between where we are now. Just the question I asked Dave. So leadership's here, what's our next level? And once you've got a gap, then you just got to bridge it. Create the gap, bridge the gap. Create the gap, bridge the gap. Create the gap, bridge the gap. And that's what I do for my own advancement. Sorry. Bob.
Wonderful. Got one more question, then we're going to finish. Yes?
Kia ora matua.
Kia rana tātou.
I'm not a cookie, but I've got lots of cookie mates, so
Yeah, cool.
really good to hear that. I'm a tuaki at a school, so I'm a principal at a school, so really interesting hearing about the policy questions and around helping our samariki. I suppose my question is, I loved your book, by the way, too.
Thank you.
Been talking to my staff about it and the concept of culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yeah.
So like at the moment, I'm trying to build that culture in my school so that people are feeling more accountable for their actions and what they do. I suppose my question probably comes back to kids that have had a similar upbringing to yourself, or that traumatic upbringing. We probably have a number at Maikura, and I suppose for me, my question is, yes, we are, as kaiako, we're getting to know our kids and trying to work with them and create structures that help them thrive. Would there be any other tips that you could give around helping those akonga thrive as opposed to survive?
Yeah, look, it's a good question, and I just think of my own experience growing up when I was in the home in Martin, and we used to. I've got certain school teachers that are clearly in my head, and even you asking that question, they came up. I've got one by the name of Pat Hayward who taught me in Martin, and I'd be sitting in the classroom and he'd go, Gilbert. And I would walk out there and he would take me down to the dairy, buy me an ice cream. I'd sit and eat the ice cream. I'd go back to class and he wouldn't say anything. He just knew where I was at in that moment on that day. And the fact that I can remember that like it is yesterday is unbelievable. And I think catching the moments, because the tamariki that you talk about things will happen in waves and different experiences. And I've got other memories just as bad where people bullied me and us just because we're in the home, and they treated us as second class. I thought I was useless at maths, and it's just one of the things I couldn't do. It's just that I thought the teacher was a dick. And so whenever he opened his mouth, I didn't listen to anything he said. So I guess what I'm saying, it comes back to the who. In life, there's a lot of what about this, but just get the right who in front of the people, and they'll move them. And treat it one by one, I think. And if you do it one by one and you build it one by one, and then they get to my stage in life, and I can still remember back to those moments when you were leading an institution, gosh, what a wonderful impact that has on the community, the family, and the whole of society.
Well done. Pete.
I think that's a...
Yeah.